We are in Deuteronomy chapter 2. And as we have begun in the book of Deuteronomy, we have been already just thrown right into storyline. And it's gathering off of quite a bit of the book of Numbers so far. Here in this, we're going to be looking at Numbers chapter 20 and 21 in essence, as it kind of capitalizes on some of the events that took place in those two chapters. And Moses is recounting these events to help them to recognize this is where you have been, so this is where you are going. That is a common theme throughout the Old Testament and throughout Jewish history, that it was very common that the Jews would look back on this is where you have been, so that you can know how you need to be. Well, today we're going to be focusing in especially on the idea of a possession in the land. That's the focus of this chapter, and it comes back to this theme over and over again. I have given them a possession in the land. As we mentioned this morning, we see that not only is that for Israel, but it's for others that were outside as well. We'll talk about that this evening. But of course, at the end, we're going to be getting to what does this have to do with us. And I believe that from each of these nations that we're going to be taking a look at, we see really a call out to us as well, as there is a possession, an inheritance that has been offered to us also. So keep that in mind as we're looking to that toward the end. It begins in this way. After they had been in Kadesh, here's what it says. Then we turned and set out for the wilderness by the way to the Red Sea, as Yahweh spoke to me, and circled Mount Seir for many days. Now, this is a very brief approach to the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. More is said about that in the book of Numbers in particular, so you can go back and read that for the historical accounting of what took place there. But this is just an entire gloss over, really, the 40 years. And it's interesting because as he is talking about coming into the land of Israel, to Moses, the 40 years aren't really that important anymore. What has been in that regard is not really all that necessary. But the way it describes it, it says that they circled Mount Seir. Now that's going to be important in a moment, so keep that in mind. And so Yahweh spoke to me saying, "You have circled this mountain long enough. Now turn north." They have been in the land of the Negeb, which literally means Southland. They have been in the land of the Negeb for 40 years, and they have been circling Mount Seir, and God says it's finally time to go north. It's finally time to take the land. It uses the same language as he did in chapter 1 and in verse 6 concerning Mount Sinai. In chapter 1 and verse 6, he said, "You have been at this mountain for long enough." And he says it again here. "You have been circling this mountain long enough." In essence, all he's saying is, it's time. The time has come. Go north. "And command the people, saying, You are going to pass through the territory of your brothers, the sons of Esau, who live in Seir. And they will be afraid of you, so be very careful. Do not provoke them, for I will not give you any of their land, even as little as a footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. You shall buy food from them with money, so that you may eat, and you shall also bargain with them for water with money, so that you may drink. For Yahweh your God has blessed you in all the work of your hand. He has known your wanderings through this great wilderness. These 40 years, Yahweh your God has been with you. You have not lacked a thing." Now, we're going to come back to this idea of that Israel had not been left barren. And the way it describes it of, even though you were in the land of the wilderness, the land of your wanderings, I took care of you. And there's going to be a note of hope here that he's giving of, so you can know that I'm going to take care of you here in just a little bit as well. So I've taken care of you, I will take care of you. But that's not the real thrust of this particular section. Here he focuses more on that there is a possession, but the possession is for Esau. Esau is the one that is in focus in this particular paragraph, as he talks about Mount Seir. Now, sometimes the word Seir can even be really synonymous with the idea of Edom. But it doesn't call it Edom here. I got a map up here for you all to be able to see, and it's a little bit difficult to see the map here, but Edom is down in this southern region just south of the Salt Sea or the Dead Sea. And so you have the Edom is right there at the bottom. This is where they have been circling for many days, and God says this is Esau's land. Esau eventually became the nation of Edom, and they took possession of Mount Seir. So this is a possession, but it is a place specifically for Esau, not for anyone else, but only for Esau. So you don't provoke them, you don't go to war against them, because, one, they're terrified of you right now, so they could be very easily provoked, because you've been circling them for 40 years, marching around them for 40 years, and they're likely terrified because they know what you did in Egypt. But don't provoke them. Be careful, because you should not go to war against these people, because this land is for Esau. Instead, make peace with them. Be at peace with them. Buy their food. Buy water from them. And there seems to be even a bartering system that is being created between these two nations. Esau is able to share with Israel. And so in that way, God is providing for them in the land of Seir. So it says, so we passed beyond our brothers, the sons of Esau, who live in Seir, away from the Arba road, away from Elath, and away from Ezion-Geber. And all of these cities are in this region in particular, and he says, we went away from there. They followed the instruction of God, and they didn't provoke Esau, even though there is some bad blood between. And there is going to continue to be some bad blood between these two brother nations. So it's interesting whenever we consider Esau's life. Because when you look back in the book of Genesis, Esau's life was not really pristine as far as faithfulness was concerned. You have that he was just totally willing to give up his birthright. He was willing to give up his blessing. Well, maybe not willing. There was some harm on Jacob and his mother's part as well. But he gives up these things, and God says it is because he was, in essence, an evil man. He was not one that cared about the will of God. And so when it talks about that he wanted his birthright and he desired it with tears, he was not able to make that repentance, it says in the book of Hebrews. Now, of course, the idea of repentance there is not that he could never repent of sin, but that he could never get that birthright back. But even still, the characterization that is made concerning Esau is not good. But later on in his life, you do see that he seems to have made amends with Jacob. There seems to be even that he makes amends before Jacob can even attempt to make amends. That he's already forgiven all of the trouble between the two of them. And so for such reason, God still gives to this, if you will, seed of Abraham, he gives a portion of the land. He gives Esau even a possession. And so they do not take that land. And it says in verse 8, and we turned and passed through by the way of the wilderness of Moab. Then Esau said to me, do not harass Moab, nor provoke them to war, for I will not give any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession. And Emim lived there formerly, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. Like Anakim, they were also regarded as Rephaim, but the Moabites called them Emim. Now the Horites formerly lived in Seir, but the sons of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them and settled in their place, just as Israel would do to the land of their possession which Yahweh gave to them. Now we're focused in now on Lot. Now Lot's family also receives a portion of the land. And it is first in the land of Moab. If you can can see a little bit of this blue here. They cross over the river Zered into the land of Moab, right next to the Dead Sea here. And so Moab was from the, if you will, illegitimate child of Lot. You remember the account of that Lot was in the land of Sodom, and that there were not even 10 righteous there. And so God goes ahead and destroys that city. But he pulls out Lot and his family. But you look at all the sin that happens after. Lot's wife looks back, turns into a pillar of salt. His daughters seduce their father by getting him drunk. And they have 2 children by their own father. And all the wrongs that you see that Lot did in order to bring about these harms in his family. And we just think, how could God have considered him righteous? But that's how he's described in the New Testament. He was righteous Lot, that his soul was tormented while he lived in Sodom. And then that he even gives a portion to these illegitimate children as well. Moab receives a portion of the land. And he gives a parenthetical here of the history behind this taking place. Not only for Moab, but also for Esau and Edom as well. That there were these people called the Emim that used to live there. And they were like the giants of the Anakim that they feared, the Israelites feared. And so they didn't go pass through Kadesh into Israel, as we saw last month in chapter 1. They didn't pass through into that land and conquer the land because of these great giants. They're tall, they're numerous. There's no way we could attack them and destroy them. And God says, I've done it before. There were the Emim that were in the land, and I pushed them out at the hands of the Moabites. I told them, I will give you a portion, and I did so. I drove out the Emim. And guess what? I did that for Esau as well. That there were these people that were called the Horites, and they had Mount Seir. I dispossessed them. And the way it's worded, it's just like it's so easy. That God just gave it to them as an inheritance. He just hands it over. Here is the land that I have promised to you. So he's giving them hope here and says, just as Israel will do as well. Don't worry about the giants. You can take possession of the land. I've done it a few times. I got this part taken care of. And so as he thinks about Moab, he says, don't trouble them either, because their land is not yours. You don't get their inheritance. Now arise, it says, and cross over the brook Zered yourselves. So we crossed over the brook Zered. Now the time that it took for us to come from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed over the brook Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war came to an end from within the camp, as Yahweh had sworn to them. Moreover, the hand of Yahweh was against them to bring them into confusion from within the camp until they all came to an end. Now, this is an interesting paragraph here because it emphasizes that his hand was against that previous generation, and his hand will be for the Israelites of this new generation. As his hand was for Edom, as his hand was for Moab, as his hand, we'll see in a moment, was also for Ammon. As all these people, God was with them. His hand was upon them. He provided for them, but not the previous generation. His hand was against them. They were the men of war, and I think he's saying that sarcastically. They were the men of war, and how I think I know that he's saying that sarcastically is the way that he says they died within the camp. They were men of war. Well, why weren't they dying in battle? Why weren't they fighting for the Lord? No, they died inside the camp as cowards, as we talked about in Bible class this morning. And so now this new generation has come. You, I will give the land to. But just like in any inheritance, sometimes there are things that are divided out to other people first, and then it is divided equally, if you will. And so he continues talking about Lot. So it happened when all the men of war had come to an end in death from among the people, that Yahweh spoke to me, saying, Today you are about to cross over Ar, the border of Moab, and you will come opposite the sons of Ammon. Do not harass them, nor provoke them, for I will not give you any of their land of the sons of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot as a possession. And so once again, he says, it is also regarded as the land of Rephaim, for Rephaim formerly lived in it, but the Ammonites called them Zemumim, a people as great and numerous as tall as the Anakim. But Yahweh destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place, just as he did for the sons of Esau who live in Seir. When he destroyed the Horites from before them, they dispossessed them and settled in their place even to this day. And so now we're talking about a new nation. They are crossing over now this river here on the north side. It's called the Ar River, or the Arnon is what it's sometimes called. And now they are passing over opposite to the land of Ammon. Ammon is up in this section, so the Amorites kind of live in between a little bit. However, once they cross over the Arnon, there is an opposite way that they are to Ammon as well. And he says, don't make them scared either. Don't go to war against them, because this is theirs. I have given it to the sons of Lot. This is the other illegitimate child of the sons of Lot's daughters. And so he says, I'm giving it to them too. Don't take it from their hand. And I got to tell you how difficult it is not for me to be saying Anakin with how much I've been watching Star Wars the last couple of months. But there were these people called the Anakim who were great and mighty. And there were also people called the Rephaim, which were great and mighty and giant-like as well. He says, I drove them out too. And I gave this land to Ammon. They didn't have to worry. I handed it over to them as a gift. So do not fear these giants that you are coming up against. Well, this parenthetical that he's giving again concerning not only Ammonites, but also it says that he did for Esau concerning the Horites, as we read earlier. In this parenthetical, he then concludes with a new group of people. Again, as we think back in verse 20, and it goes down into verse 23, really, you have that there is a portion of the land for Caphtor. And we're like, I don't remember that in the genealogies. Well, you shouldn't, because it's not in the genealogies of the book of Genesis of the people that are of Abraham's tribes. Caphtor, it says in verse 23, and the Avim, who lived in villages as far as Gaza, the Caphtorim, or the Caphtorites, who came from Caphtor, destroyed them and lived in their place. So who is this Caphtor? Well, the island of Caphtor, it's not on this map, however, it would be up in this region if the map were a little bit bigger. And it is what we call the island of Crete. We're familiar with that from the New Testament, especially with Paul and Barnabas' journeys. We hear about the island of Crete quite frequently. So the island of Crete originally, or earlier, was called the island of Caphtor. And they came and they took possession of the land. Well, the Caphtorites eventually became the Philistines. Now, that's interesting because the language that's being used here of that they destroyed them and lived in their place, it doesn't use the phrase exactly that he has been using of, and I gave them a portion of the land, but all the language is the same, as almost as if to say, God gave them this land. He gave it to the Philistines, the Caphtorites. He handed it over to them just in the same way that he did to Abraham's offspring as well. He handed it to them. We're not told why, But we do know the rest of the story of the Philistines, don't we? Even though they are given a portion of the land, God takes it out of their hand as well. Just as easily as God can give the land, he can take it away, can he? So these Philistines, these Gentiles, even they can receive a part of God's inheritance. Yeah, they can. Just in the same way that the Egyptians could come into God's people after the Exodus account takes place, or while the Exodus account is taking place, that the Egyptians even started joining in, that there is a large host of multitudes of Gentiles, it says, that comes into the people of Israel. It's not just the 12 tribes that come into the people of Israel, but even these Egyptians, perhaps Midianites, perhaps any of these people that were in the land of Egypt at the time, and they say, I'm going to be a part of God's people. Like it says in the book of Hosea, that all of these Gentiles grab onto a Jew's cloak and says, let us join with you. It seems to be that the Philistines, they are offered a portion as well. But then in verse 24, it says, arise, set out, and pass through the valley of Arnon. Look, I have given Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land into your hands. Begin to take possession, and, this powerful language after what he's been saying, provoke him to battle. Do not worry about provoking him to battle, because I am stripping this land from him. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under the heavens, who, when they hear the report of you, will tremble and be in anguish because of you, just as he did with Egypt, and all the people of Canaan were trembling concerning the message of what was being spoken about these Israelites, and just as it is said by Rahab that the city of Jericho was trembling at all that was taking place, God promises it here by taking over Sihon, king of Heshbon. And again, just for reference, the Amorites live in this portion of region right through here. And here is Heshbon, which is where Sihon is from. So God says, you take them to battle because this is going to be your land. So why is it that I have up here that this is for Sihon? Let's continue reading. So I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon, king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, let me, Moses makes this very personal, let me pass through your land. I will go only on the highway. I will not turn aside to the right or to the left. You will sell me food for money so that I may eat, and give me water for money so that I may drink. Only let me pass through on foot, just as the sons of Esau who live in Seir and the Moabites who live in Ar did for me, until I cross over the Jordan into the land which Yahweh our God is giving us. It's the exact same language that he said concerning Seir, Edom, Esau, Moab. All of these nations that God told them, you buy from them food, you buy from them drink, you keep at peace with them. Moses is offering the same deal to the Amorites. He says, just let us pass through. That's all we want. That's all we're looking for. And by God also transcribing it here, it seems to be that God is approving of this action of Moses, and God is even saying, yes, you should offer them peace. Because I offered for the Kaphtorites to be in the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, if you will, at this point. I offered for them those Gentiles that now have become filthy rags, and I'm going to dispossess them now. I offered it to them, and they accepted for a time. I am now offering the same deal to the Amorites. Again, these Gentiles even can be a part of God's people and God's inheritance. Offer it to them. However, what happens? You read the rest of the passage. It says, but Sihon, king of Heshbon, was not willing for us to pass through his land. For Yahweh your God stiffened his neck and made his heart obstinate in order to give him over into your hand as it is this day. And Yahweh said to me, see, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to possess, so that you may fully possess his land. Then Sihon with all his people came out to meet us in battle at Jahaz. Here is the offer. This is your land. It can stay your land. Only allow us to go through in peace. It is yours that God is giving to you. And they refuse. They reject the message of peace that God offers to them. They become obstinate, and their heart is made hard by the offer that God makes. Isn't it interesting that the same gospel that offers salvation and peace, some accept it as such, and they accept it as, this is what I need, and others turn their nose at it, and they say, I don't want any part of that. The same gospel that is presented to one heart that is willing to accept is presented to another heart, and that heart is hardened. You see it with Pharaoh. You see it with Sihon, king of Heshbon, in this passage as well. But Yahweh, our God, gave him over to us. And this ought to just sadden us based on what we just read. Yahweh, our God, gave him over to us, and we struck him down with his sons and all his people. So we captured all his cities at that time and devoted to destruction the men, women, and little ones of every city. I'll have more to say about that idea next month. We left no survivor remaining. We took only the animals as our plunder and the spoil of the cities which we had captured, from Aurora, which is on the edge of the valley of Arnon, and from the city which is in the valley even to Gilead. There was not a town that was too high for us. Yahweh our God gave all over to us. God says, now take it, because I am going to dispossess Sihon. I'm done with him. His sins have mounted up too great, and on top of that, when I offered them peace, they rejected it. So wipe it all clean. This is their due punishment for not obeying the Lord God. Dispossess them just as easily as I dispossess the Horites, as I dispossess the Emim, as I dispossess the Rephaim. Wipe them clean. They refused their peace. It was for Sihon, and they rejected it. So therefore, it's all going to be for Israel now. In the last verse it says, only you did not go near to the land of the sons of Ammon, all along the river Jabbok and the cities of the hill country, and wherever Yahweh our God had commanded us. So, as we've been looking in all of this context, don't go into Edom and take that. Don't go into Moab or take that. Don't go into Ammon and take that. Offer peace to the Amorites, but take that because they refuse to serve the Lord. Take all of the land of Canaan because they refuse to serve the Lord. This is now yours. Yours to divide amongst yourselves. Yours to take possession of. And you look through all of this text, and it's just, we've been weeding through and seeing that all of the text is talking about, I will give it to you. This is about what Israel's land is, because Moses is speaking to the children of Israel. Don't take this, don't take this, don't take this, because I have something special for you. I have a land that I will give into your hand, just as I gave to Lot, just as I gave to Esau. I will give it to the sons of Israel as well. So begin in verse 31, begin to possess so that you may fully possess the land. There's a repetition in that. He's trying to emphasize This is now yours. Begin to possess so that you may possess his land. It's now yours. And it's going to be so easy. So easy that it says in verse 36 that as they went from Aurora, from the south, all the way to the north in Gilead of the Amorites, it says there was not a town that was too high for us. You want to know the power of that? Is when you contrast that with chapter 1 and verse 28, where there, back at Kadesh, where they were making a decision concerning themselves, we talked about last month, there they said, the cities are fortified to heaven. They are too high for us. God says, and Moses says, there was not a city that was too high. There was not a battle that was too difficult. There was not a giant who was too great. God gave them their inheritance. The battle belonged to the Lord. It was his to do with what he pleased. And this was his land to do with what he pleased. This is God's inheritance. And he is handing it over to the children of Israel and to all of these others that are not only sons of Abraham, but even those that are outside of the family of Abraham. And so as we think about, well, what's this all mean for me? Why do we need to know this today? I hope we can already start to see the parallels. God offers his inheritance to all of us. You and me. It doesn't matter if you are a child of Abraham by blood or you are a child of Abraham by promise. That is the Gentile. If you are a Gentile or a Jew, God offers his inheritance to you. And when we think about these battles and the giants that they are talking about, how easy it is, God, for just handing it over to us. Then why do we struggle? Why do we come to a point that we think that the giants are too grand and the battle is too great and the cities are too fortified? That kind of gets back to our lesson last month. But here's what I want us to make very clear. As we sing the song often, the gospel is for all. It is for Esau. It's for Moab. It is for Ammon. It is for all of these nations that were children of Abraham. But it is also for the Caphtorite. It is also for the Amorite. But both of those nations rejected at some point. Let us not be like the Caphtorites, who gladly receive their portion in the land of God. And then, by all of those spiritual battles failing again and again, God says, all right, the inheritance can't be yours anymore. But let us also not be like the Amorites, who when they hear the message of peace, they immediately reject it. And God punishes them rightly for it. Have you heard the gospel? Have you heard the message of peace and have rejected it? Turn. Be like the Caphtorites in this way, that you gladly receive the message, but don't be like the Caphtorites in that one day you're like, you know what? This is too hard. This is too difficult. I'm done. Well, guess what? If you're done with serving the Lord, that means you're done with his inheritance too. And he'll strip it from you. Be like Moab and Edom and Ammon. And I know you guys are already thinking, well, you know what happened to them too. Yeah. In the minor prophets and the major prophets as well, they are stripped of their land also. Why? Because they became like the Philistines. Don't be like them. Be like Israel. Israel, who received the land gladly, they lived in it faithfully, and well, it happened to them too, didn't it? That they became unfaithful, and God stripped away the land from them also. Just as we'll see in the book of Deuteronomy, especially as we get to chapters 28 and 29. God can strip it away from anyone who is unfaithful to the Lord. However, he offers a possession in the land contingent on your faithfulness. So the plea that I give to each and every one of us is inherit the land. Because if you are faithful to the Lord, you can rest assured that he will not allow any others to come and take your inheritance. He will allow you to remain in the land, and he will not strip it from you if you are faithful to him. If you need to repent of any wrongs, if you need to become a child of God today, the front pew is left open for you. Come to the front while we stand and while we sing.